The snow came early that year, as if the sky itself had run out of reasons to wait. He saw her from the porch, small, soaked and shivering beneath a street lamp. She looked like she belonged to no one. Daniel didn't move at first, just watched. Steam curled from the chipped mug in his hands, a ghost in the frozen air. His breath came out in small, tired clouds. The porch light hummed behind him, casting a soft golden glow across the snow-slick boards. She didn't look up, just sat there, her knees drawn to her chest, fingers curled into the sleeves of a threadbare hoodie. The snow clung to her hair, like frost on pine needles. Her suitcase sat beside her, more tattered than she was, its zipper barely holding. Eli's voice came from behind the door, high and soft, asking about dinner. Daniel turned, answered gently, then looked back. Still there, he didn't say anything when he stepped off the porch and walked toward her. Just offered a hand. She didn't take it, but she looked up and her eyes, wide, red-rimmed and hollow, met his. "You hungry?" he asked. She blinked, then nodded once, almost too small to see. He didn't ask where she came from, didn't ask her name. Instead, he handed her the mug. She held it like it was made of gold. Together, they walked back to the cabin, her steps, slow, cautious, like a deer unsure of a hunter's kindness. Inside, the fire was still going. The room smelled of cedar smoke and lentil stew. A modest cabin. Wooden beams, low ceilings, mismatched furniture, and warmth only found where struggle has made room for tenderness. Daniel gestured to the chair near the hearth. She sank into it. The coat draped over her belly shifted slightly. But he said nothing. The stove hissed. The clock on the wall ticked like an old heart. He brought her soup. No words. Just a steaming bowl with a chipped rim and a folded napkin beside it. She didn't thank him, but she ate slowly, each spoonful like an apology to herself. Eli peeked in from the hallway. Daniel met his son's eyes and gave a small shake of the head. Later. The girl stayed by the fire for a long time after the bowl was empty. He handed her a blanket. She hesitated before taking it, her eyes flickering over his face, searching for the catch. "There's a room upstairs," he said. "Loft's not much, but it's warm. You can sleep, figure things out tomorrow." Her eyes softened, but she said, "Just tonight." He nodded once. "Just tonight." She climbed the stairs slowly, the suitcase dragging behind her like a second shadow. The loft door closed with a soft click. Daniel exhaled. The room suddenly felt heavier. The next morning, she was gone. The front door hung open slightly. Snow had blown in, leaving a small drift across the rug. Daniel closed it, quietly inside. He didn't tell Eli, but that night she returned. No knock, just a shape in the doorway, holding herself like she'd been hollowed out. Her lips were blue, her coat stiff with frost. He said nothing, just stepped aside. She entered without a word. The second night, she didn't go to the loft right away. She sat by the fire, her hands wrapped around another bowl of soup, silent as stone. After a while, she whispered, "Marla." Daniel looked up from the kettle. "My name," she added, not looking at him. "It's Marla." He nodded. "Daniel," she gave a ghost of a smile. "I know." The third night, she found a folded sweater in the loft's drawer. Too big. The sleeves hung past her hands. But it was warm, and she wore it like armor. It smelled faintly of pine and smoke, and of something gentler. Daniel, maybe. There were no rules spoken aloud, but the days found a rhythm. She swept when she could, chopped vegetables with steady hands, washed dishes without being asked. Daniel left things out for her without a word. A pair of wool socks on the railing, a small bottle of lotion near the sink, a worn but soft journal and pen on the coffee table, She never said thank you, but he'd find the pen moved, pages ruffled. Eli started leaving her drawings. Stick figures in the snow, a family of 3 beside a house with a crooked chimney. One had a tiny baby with a yellow sun above its head. She didn't comment, but she tucked that one into her suitcase. First time she laughed was watching Eli make a snow angel. He'd run in circles pretending to be a snow dragon, and she stood on the porch, arms crossed over her bump, biting back a grin. Daniel caught it. Didn't say a word. Later that night she stood in the kitchen washing dishes. Steam rose around her hands. Daniel leaned in the doorway. "You okay?" She hesitated, then nodded. "It's better than before." He didn't ask what before meant. He never did. Some silences don't need filling. The nights grew longer. Snow piled high along the cabin walls. Daniel taught Eli how to build a fire. Marla listened from the stairs, her fingers curled around a chipped mug, the music box quietly playing in the background. It had belonged to Daniel's wife, a tiny wooden thing with a faded painted rose on the lid. He hadn't wound it in years, but one evening, as snow fell thick outside, he took it down, wound it gently, and placed it near the hearth. It played a lullaby, a slow, lilting melody that made Marla go still. She didn't ask. But later that night, she crept back down and played it again, alone in the dark. One morning, Daniel found a letter in the fireplace, half-burned, edges blackened, words melted into ash. He didn't ask, but that night, she wore the sweater again and stayed by the fire longer than usual. When she was too tired to help with chores, he didn't mention it. Just set the broom aside, left soup on the counter, and let her rest. The snow showed no signs of stopping. Eli asked her once if she had a name for the baby. She looked startled, then touched her stomach lightly. "Not yet," she said. "Haven't heard it yet." He tilted his head. "Babies tell you," she smiled, "a real one. Sometimes when it's time." That night, Daniel found her asleep on the couch, Eli curled beside her. The fire crackled softly. Her hand was resting on her belly, and her other on Eli's small shoulder. He stood in the hallway, watching. The room was wrapped in quiet. Not peace exactly, but something close. When he turned to go upstairs, he left the music box playing. The snow didn't leave all at once. It lingered like breath on a window pane, thin, stubborn patches hiding in the shadows of trees and rooftops. But the edges of winter had begun to melt, quietly, like a secret being shared. Mornings came earlier. Now, the sun climbed a little higher each day, casting light on the muddy paths outside the cabin. Birds returned one by one, cautious at first. Daniel noticed their songs during his walks to the shed, and sometimes he'd pause, just to listen. One morning, Mara sat at the kitchen table, elbows resting on wood worn smooth by time. A soft steam rose from her tea. She hadn't spoken yet, but her eyes tracked Eli's playful humming as he lined up pebbles on the windowsill. Then, without lifting her gaze, she said, "It's Mara." Daniel looked up from the sink. "My real name," she added. He nodded slowly. "Okay." She traced the rim of the mug with her fingertip. "My mom gave it to me. She thought it sounded strong." "And your mom?" he asked, careful. "She told me to leave," Mara said. "Said I was choosing wrong. That if I wouldn't get rid of it, I couldn't stay." Her hand shifted, rested gently on her belly. "So I left." Daniel dried his hands on a dish towel. "The father?" "Gone, before I even told him. They didn't speak for a while after that." Eli filled the silence with laughter from the living room. The snow had melted into a slush pond he insisted was his lake. Later that night, after Eli had gone to bed, Mara found Daniel outside on the porch, wrapped in a thick coat, watching the stars rise. She handed him a mug of tea, sat beside him. He spoke first, this time. "My wife, Lena. She died giving birth to Eli." Mara looked at him, quiet. "She was kind," Daniel said. "Soft but stronger than anyone I knew. We got married young, thought we had forever." He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded photo, creased at the edges, corners worn thin. Lena stood in a sunlit field, holding her belly, grinning, like she'd just stolen the sky. Mara took it gently, studied the face. "She looks like someone who laughed a lot." "She did," Daniel said, "and danced when no one was watching." They sat there until the tea cooled. In the mornings, Mara started waking first. She learned which floorboards creaked, where the oats were kept, how much honey Eli liked in his porridge. She set the table before he rubbed sleep from his eyes. She wasn't trying to replace anyone, just trying to matter. Eli asked her one day, mouth full of toast, "Will the baby be my snow sister?" Mara smiled. "She might." He beamed. Then, "I'm gonna teach her how to catch frogs." Daniel returned from town one afternoon with a small brown bag. He handed it to Mara without a word. Inside were prenatal vitamins, a knitted cap, and a used stroller that still smelled faintly of pine cleaner. She touched each item as if afraid they'd vanish. "Thank you," she whispered, so softly he almost missed it. One evening the town held a winter bonfire. A clearing near the old schoolhouse lit by torches and flickering flames, laughter wrapped in scarves and mittens. Daniel brought Eli, and Mara walked beside them, her coat buttoned tight, the air cold against her cheeks, when people asked, Daniel said, "She's a friend staying with us." There were looks, whispers, but he stood tall beside her, shoulders square, hand resting on Eli's small back. Mara stood quiet at first, uncertain. But when the first spark of fire danced into the sky, Eli tugged her hand, pulled her close, and said, "That's how stars are born." She smiled, held on to that warmth. That night by the fire, Mara pulled a small shoebox from beneath the couch. Inside were folded pieces of paper, written in different pens, some with smudges, others with neat lines. "Letters," she said, "for her, for when she's older, in case I can't tell her everything." Daniel didn't speak. She unfolded one and began to read aloud. "Dear little one, today the sun came out. It wasn't much, but I saw it glint off the frost and thought, your fingers small and bright. You're still quiet, but I know you're listening. I want you to know I left everything behind because I believed in you." Her voice cracked. She wiped her nose with her sleeve. Daniel didn't interrupt, just let the letter settle like snow into the silence. Another morning she found a baby blanket folded in a drawer, pale yellow, soft with age. She ran her fingers over the stitching, hesitated, then held it to her face. Daniel saw her later that day, standing at the edge of the woods, blanket in hand, tears drying in the wind. She braided Eli's hair before school one morning. He grinned so wide his eyes disappeared, bouncing as he pulled on his boots. "Pretty cool, huh?" he said to Daniel, running to show off. Daniel smiled. "Very cool." Then there was the teacup, one of Lena's old set, delicate with painted violets. Mara had been careful, but it slipped in the sink, cracked loudly, shattered across the tile. She froze, hand to her mouth, eyes wide. Daniel stepped in, crouched down, picked up the pieces slowly. "I'm sorry," she whispered, voice trembling. He looked up. "She'd have liked you," Mara cried then. Not from fear, not even from guilt, just from the weight of being seen. One evening near the end of February, she gasped softly, hand shooting to her stomach. Daniel looked up from the woodpile. "You okay?" Her eyes lit up. She kicked. He came over. She took his hand, pressed it gently against her belly. A small, fluttering push met his palm. His breath caught. "She's strong," Mara whispered. He nodded. "She is." Later that week, while setting the table, Mara caught herself saying, "Let me just grab that from the pantry. We've got some in the back, at home." She froze. Daniel looked over. Her eyes dropped, but he said nothing. Just passed her a spoon and continued setting out the bowls. That night, she added another letter to the shoebox. This one began, "Dear little one, today I called someplace home." It surprised me. I think maybe it surprised him too. But the sky didn't fall, and that feels like something. Spring was coming. The wood stove still burned at night, but the snow was almost gone from the roof. The muddy path out front grew firmer. Birds returned in full chorus. The cabin didn't feel quiet anymore, not in a hollow way. The silence was different now. Softer. Shared. The rain had started just before dawn, tapping gently at the roof like someone too polite to knock louder. The fire had burned low in the stove, its last embers pulsing with quiet breath. Birds had returned to the trees days ago, but this morning, they were still hushed under the gray. Mara woke with a pain sharp enough to steal her breath. She gripped the quilt and sat up slowly, the cabin dim in the early light. Another wave came, deeper, stronger. It left her shaking. She called out. Daniel was there in an instant, rubbing his eyes, voice already steady. "What is it?" She didn't answer right away. Just looked at him, her hand low on her belly, eyes wide. The silence between them said everything. Eli stirred in the loft above, then rolled over, still dreaming. The power had gone out during the night. The lamps wouldn't click on. The phone sat mute on the kitchen wall. No cell signal reached this far into the woods. The path to town, muddy and half-washed by the spring thaw, was too slick for tires. "We can't," she began, then stopped. Daniel nodded once, set his jaw. "We'll do it here." He moved with quiet purpose, fetching towels, heating water over the stove, laying blankets near the hearth. His hands shook, but not badly. Not so much that she noticed. Or maybe she did, but chose not to say. Labor came. In waves. Mara gritted her teeth, sometimes silent, sometimes loud. She gripped the edge of the couch until her knuckles turned white. Daniel knelt beside her, whispered soft, steady things, nothing profound, but honest. "You're doing good. You've got this." Outside, Eli sat under the porch overhang, the old music box in his lap. He cranked the handle slowly, again and again. Tinny, sweet notes floated into the rain. He'd been told to wait, to be brave. He didn't ask how long. The moment stretched like a thread about to snap. Then, sudden and sharp, came the sound. The first cry, new and fierce and alive. Mara sobbed as she held him for the first time, wet and red and impossibly small. "A boy," Daniel said, voice hoarse with awe. Eli stopped turning the crank. The music box wound down. They wrapped the child in the birth cloth, the one stitched with Eli's name, now shared with Jonah. Mara cradled him, exhausted and trembling. "Jonah," she said softly, eyes closed. Daniel brushed sweat-damp hair from her forehead. "He belongs to you," he whispered, "but you all belong here now." She wept again, but it wasn't fear this time. That night the cabin felt fuller than it ever had. No electricity, just firelight, soft and flickering, painting the walls with gold. Mara couldn't sleep. She sat in bed watching the rise and fall of Jonah's breath. Every few minutes her fingers reached out, as if to confirm he was real. Daniel didn't sleep either. He pulled a chair close, sat with her, one hand on the mug of now cold tea, the other resting quietly on the arm of her chair. She looked at him. He didn't speak, just sat with her through the hush. She reached out, touched his shoulder. He didn't move away. Instead, he leaned toward her just slightly. A single kiss followed, unsure, soft, full of every moment. That led to it. Not an answer, but maybe a beginning. In the days that followed, the rain continued, soft but constant. The path outside became a shallow stream. Birds sang in between showers. Flowers, bold and foolish, pushed up from the cold. Ground inside the cabin settled into rhythm. Mara rested as much as she could, though her body fought it. She always wanted to check Jonah, always listened for his breath. Daniel took over the kitchen, preparing oatmeal, stews, and strong tea with honey. Eli brought picture books down from the loft and read to Jonah, who mostly slept through them, but Eli insisted. He's listening. Babies are secret listeners. At night, Daniel rocked Jonah in the old wooden chair Lena once used. He didn't say much while he did it, just hummed or stared into the fire. Sometimes Mara sat on the floor beside him, her back against the couch, breathing in the peace she never thought she'd know again. One afternoon, a letter came. Damp from the mailbox, the envelope bore a familiar script. Mara opened it on the porch, hands stiff. Her mother's handwriting hadn't changed. The message was short, cold. She was to come back, alone. Her mother would forget what had happened, if only Mara made the right choice this time. She read it once, folded it, left it on the table. Daniel saw it later, held it for a long time without opening. Mara came in, took it from his hand, and tore it straight down the center. Then again, quietly, with purpose. No tears this time. That night she read another letter to Jonah, her voice stronger now, more certain. Dear little one, today you came into the world and changed everything. The rain tried to wash us away, but we stayed. You cried louder than the thunder, and we listened. We were all listening. The fire crackled. Eli drew pictures on scrap paper. 4 people holding hands under a wide, laughing sun. He handed it to Daniel, proud. That's you, and Mara, and me, and Jonah. We're all here now. Daniel stared at it a long time, then taped it to the side of the fridge. Another week passed. Mara found herself humming while folding Jonah's tiny clothes. She didn't recognize the tune. Maybe it was something Lena once sang, maybe it was hers now. In the evenings, she sat closer to Daniel on the rug, their shoulders brushed. Neither moved away. The silence, once heavy and full of things unsaid, now felt warm, familiar. It didn't demand anything. It offered instead. One night, long after Eli had gone to bed and Jonah was curled against her chest, Mara whispered, I didn't think I'd survive this. Daniel was beside her, staring at the fire. He didn't ask her to explain. But I'm glad I did, she added. He nodded. The rain stopped the next morning. Sunlight pooled on the floorboards, golden and wide. The wind smelled like moss and warm earth. The trees, bare for so long, were budding green tips. Mara stood in the doorway, Jonah in her arms, Eli by her side. Daniel stepped behind them, one hand on the doorframe, the other on her back. Spring, she said softly. He smiled. Welcome home. The wind in spring was softer now. It curved gently through the pines behind the cabin, whispering stories only the trees remembered. On the mantel above the fireplace, there were pictures framed in mismatched wood, snapshots of time that had passed quietly but left its mark. A baby swaddled in an old birth cloth, A small boy laughing with jam on his cheeks, Eli holding a fishing pole far too big for him, and Mara, caught mid-laugh, her hair wild in the wind. Jonah, now 6, sat, cross-legged on the rug, the old music box in his lap. The crank was stiffer than it used to be. "Daniel?" he asked, tilting his head up. "How come you never got married again?" Daniel looked up from where he sat near the fire, glasses low on his nose, a book half forgotten in his lap. He took his time answering, then smiled. "Because I did. Jonah, in every way that matters." Jonah frowned in the thoughtful way he had, trying to piece that together. He gave the crank another turn. The music stuttered, then gave out a sad, warbled note. "It's broken," he said. "We'll fix it," Daniel replied. Later that afternoon, Mara sat at the table with Jonah, tiny tools spread out between them. Her hands, once uncertain, now moved with skill. She guided Jonah's fingers, gently letting him help as much as he could. She never raised her voice when he dropped a screw or asked the same question twice. "Things break," she said, "but that doesn't mean they're done. Sometimes they're just waiting for someone to care enough to fix them." Jonah nodded, as if understanding something much bigger than a broken music box. Outside, Eli, now 13, split firewood with the rhythm of someone who'd been doing it for years. He wiped sweat from his brow and tossed a log onto the pile with a grin. He was growing fast, nearly taller than Mara already. His voice was deeper, his jokes sharper. But every night, without fail, he read to Jonah from the old stack of picture books. It had become their ritual, their way of holding time still for a little while longer. Daniel fell ill in late October. Nothing terrible, just a fever, a cough, enough to keep him in bed and quiet for 3 days. But it was enough. Mara sat beside him every evening after work. She still wore her nurse's scrubs, hair tied back, fingers cool and steady as they checked his forehead or smoothed the blankets. She'd begun working part-time at the clinic in town, and when she wasn't there, she volunteered at a shelter for teen mothers. No one had to tell her how much that mattered. She already knew. "You're doing too much," Daniel rasped once, half awake. She shook her head. "Not enough. Not yet." And then more softly, "This is the easy part. Loving. Someone who made me believe again." He drifted back to sleep before she finished the thought. On the second night of his fever, she placed a folded piece of paper in the pocket of his coat, the brown one he always forgot he owned until the first frost. He didn't find it right. Away. That morning, Eli and Jonah were drawing by the hearth. Jonah's son had arms and a face. Eli was shading trees with surprising precision. Daniel, now upright and recovering, went to fetch kindling. His hand found the paper before the matches. He unfolded it slowly. Mara was outside hanging laundry. The sky stretched wide and clean above her. But her words were here now, speaking through the page. "You found me when I had nothing. You gave me warmth when I didn't think I deserved it. You gave my son a father. You gave me a place to begin again. And now, wherever we are home." He read it twice, the second time aloud. The boys looked up, listening but not interrupting. Jonah came to his side, slipping his hand into Daniel's. That night the fire burned steady. Jonah fell asleep early, curled beneath the quilt Lena had made. Eli lay on the floor beside the fire, nose deep in a fantasy novel, his lips moving silently with the words. Mara curled beside Daniel on the couch, resting her head against his shoulder. He folded the letter again, tucked it into the book beside him, and kissed the top of her head. The music box sat on the table now, repaired. Please. Jonah would wind it again tomorrow, maybe the day after. The song would play. Just a little off-key, but still sweet. In the quiet of the cabin, time moved like a slow breath, deliberate, kind, and deeply earned. Daniel watched the firelight flicker across the walls and thought, not for the first time, she was never the miracle I expected, but she became the one I needed. If this story touched you, subscribe or share where you're watching from. These stories matter, because second chances do too.